Association of Southeast Asian Nations, an institution which has now been with us for almost 50 years. And if we reflect upon where it's evolved over the last 50 years, it has been an interesting journey. Engage one another, thereby contributing to enhancing mutual understanding, strategic trust, and creating an environment conducive to maintenance and promoting peace, stability, development, cooperation in the region and in the world.
The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, was established on August 8, 1967 in Bangkok by the 5 original member countries, namely Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. Brunei Darussalam joined on January 8, 1984, Vietnam on July 28, 1995, Laos PDR and Myanmar on July 23, 1997, and Cambodia on April 30, 1999. The ASEAN region has a population of about 500 million, a total area of 4.5 million square kilometers, a combined gross domestic product of almost $700 billion, and a total trade of about $850 billion. The ASEAN Declaration states that the aims and purposes of the association are: first, to accelerate economic growth, social progress, and cultural development in the region, and second, to promote regional peace and stability through abiding respect for justice and the rule of law in the relationship among countries in the region, and adherence to the principle of the United Nations Charter. The ASEAN Vision 2020, adopted by the ASEAN leaders on the 30th anniversary of ASEAN, agreed on a shared vision of ASEAN as a concert of Southeast Asian nations, outward-looking, living in peace, stability, and prosperity, bonded together in partnership in dynamic development and in a community of caring societies. In 2003, the ASEAN leaders resolved that an ASEAN community shall be established comprising 3 pillars, namely ASEAN Security Community, ASEAN Economic Community, and ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community. ASEAN member countries have adopted the following fundamental principles in their relations with one another, as contained in the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in Southeast Asia, or TAC. First, mutual respect for the independence, sovereignty, equality, territorial integrity, and national identity of all nations. Second, the right of every state to lead its national existence free from external interference, subversion, or coercion. Third, non-interference in the internal affairs of one another. Fourth, settlement of differences or disputes by peaceful manner. Fifth, renunciation of the threat or use of force. And lastly, effective cooperation among themselves.
Moving forward, let's now see the economic effects of ASEAN integration to the Philippines. Through the years, the ASEAN region has been moving towards economic integration for some time. Tariffs for most manufacturing goods have already fallen to low levels between the member nations. Capital is moving freely across member countries. Service professionals continue to practice and work across ASEAN borders. At the other end of the spectrum, we do not expect the free flow of labor for a long time to come. There is a lot to talk about how Filipino policymakers and businesses should prepare for and take advantage of the opportunities offered by the ASEAN Economic Community. The reality is that the Philippine enterprises have been investing and doing business in Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and Vietnam since the early 1980s. Even more important, the Philippines need to take some bold measures to put its own house in order to be an attractive place for business. In order to plan ahead, one must learn from the past. The Philippines economy has gone through many ups and downs in the last 60 years. past political regimes have left their indelible marks on the economy. Though the Philippines was once considered as one of the most promising economies of Asia in the 1950s, the Philippines witnessed a systematic degeneration of its economy in the decades that followed. After 6 decades of repeated boom and bust economic cycles and almost 2 decades of slow and painful reforms, the Asean Integration has contributed to the Philippines' sustained annual growth rates of 7 to 10%. The effects of the strong and sound economic policies of the last 14 years are clearly reflected in the country's growth performance. GDP growth rose from 3.7% in 2011 to 7.2% in 2013. The country achieved 6.9% growth in GDP in the last quarter of 2014, establishing 3 years of continuous growth for the first time since the mid-1950s. Major players such as the Salim Group from Indonesia, Singtel and Keppel Corporation from Singapore, and Charwen Pakvan Group from Thailand have established their presence in the Philippines, resulting in a continuous increase in portfolio investment in the country. Toward the end of the last century and the beginning of this one, Philippines-based food and beverage enterprises began expanding their operations to selected ASEAN countries like the Robinson Group, Liwayway Manufacturing or Oishi brand, Century Pacific, Jollibee, and NutriAsia being noteworthy cases in point. In 2014, overseas workers accounted for 12% of the Philippines' labor force and contributed $26 billion to the economy. Some Filipinos are sought after their ASEAN neighbors for key management positions. For over 20 years, Indonesian companies have been importing Filipino managers to head their marketing, finance, and accounting functions. In fact, SGV and Corporation was instrumental in building Indonesia's accounting and auditing sector, and many SGV professionals have ascended to top executive positions in numerous Indonesian conglomerates. In addition, there are many American multinationals hiring Filipinos to run operations in Vietnam. With the full integration of the ASEAN countries, the investments, services, job skills, and a free market would enable the Philippines to have economic prosperity, and the benefits will eventually trickle down to the citizens.
And my topic is all about the 5 benefits Filipino can get from Asian integration. These are the sum of advantages that you as a Filipino citizens would be able to enjoy after the Philippines is completely incorporated into the Association of Asian Nations, or what we call ASEAN. Asian ambition is to join the European Union as one of the world's leading economies. It is preferable to work together rather than alone to attain that aim, and to provide the people with opportunities to do so. The Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, Singapore, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam are the 10 Southeast Asian countries that have banded together to improve their economies and discuss issues such as border disputes, trade agreements, and exchange programs such as education and employment. We have 5 benefits of citizens belonging to an Asian country member. First, lower cost of living. The Asian economic community intends to eliminate or at least reduce export duties between countries, lowering products' prices. So once the borders are open to commerce, it is probably that some of the cost of exporting goods would be reduced, and therefore what are we doing here is improving the population purchasing power, said Ronald Mendoza, Dean of the Ateneo of the School of the Government. The second one is to improve job opportunities and general being. Products or goods are not previously available to the country will be easier to access. A good example would be the availability of items like chocolates, clothes, and foods product not native to the local country. Before Asian, these items, apples, oranges, and chocolates, are hard to come by and expensive. One has to import to avail their hence taxes are imposed. So the third one is better job opportunities and education abroad. The development of the Asian Charter requires the free exchange of knowledge and expertise. Nationals can work in the countries, enhancing productivity and consequently providing additional jobs changes for Filipinos working overseas or OFW. Workers will be better protected if visas and work permits for the skilled labor are made easier. It will not be limited to the workers but also the students as well. Asian universities are allowing more foreign students and study in the campuses, thus increasing mobility for the region. 4 is less hassle in traveling. As a result of Asian integration, it is now possible to travel the other nations, and tourism has exploded. It has provided of tourism business new opportunity to advertise the local scenery and make more cash. Traveling to other Asian countries will show nationals that are not alone to the road economic prosperity, and that by bonding together as one of Asian region, they can influence global policy to work toward the Asian University. So the last one is Philippine prosperity. Investments, services, employment skills, and the free market would be enabled to the Philippines to achieve economic development with advantages eventually trickling down to the inhabitants. And that's all. Thank you.
Now, let's talk about the advantage and disadvantage of ASEAN integration here in the Philippines. Let's go first on its advantages. First advantage of it is easier and cheaper travel options for everyone. Of course, it only makes sense that ASEAN wants to provide easier travel services for their service providers. However, even citizens can enjoy the benefit of improved air, sea, or land travel. Next one is cheaper goods and services. Other than better travel option, ASEAN also gives nations within the region to do more trade for goods and services. Tax on imported goods is lower or even eliminated. Next one is more and better jobs. With the progressive dynamic between the ASEAN region with easier and cheaper travel options, goods and services, it only makes sense that it's come with the extended bonus of better employment opportunity. Take note, the continent makes up 1/3 of global GDP. You can only expect that Asia will keep doing what it can to maintain and exceed this performance. It also highly beneficial to the country's IT industry, seeing as how ASEAN has 700 million digital consumers. Next one is more study options. The Filipino would have more access to better jobs if they are better equipped for these emerging roles. Thankfully, even the country's education would enhance because of ASEAN integration. Now let's talk about the last advantage of it. ASEAN contributes to the advancement of Philippines as a whole. Because of the incredible support from the Southeast Asian nation, the country is better prepared for globalization. On the other hand, there are also disadvantages of ASEAN. The ASEAN integration caused market to be flooded by cheaper products. Example of agricultural products like sugar and rice are cheaper in places like Cambodia and India. Filipinos will end up consumers. We prefer buying less expensive than more expensive products. The same situation like we're preferring the other countries' products that are local products. The agricultural sector of Thailand was negatively impacted by the reduce of tariffs because of great of imported agricultural goods. It has similar situation in our country that give advantage of ASEAN economic